Welcome to Joy in the Breakthrough, a podcast where we'll be talking to a wide range of leaders from different generations and backgrounds, leaders who have found power in being broken open. I'm Connie Lindsey.
And I'm Anna Valencia. We are your hosts, and we believe that our challenges can lead to breakthroughs, and we want to share those insights with you.
We hope these stories will inspire you to explore the I'm possible in you.
Welcome to Joy in the Breakthrough, and we're so excited to have a friend of mine, Jenny Guzman, and a community civic leader. You just got an award for that, I know.
Thank you.
And so before we dive in, I'm going to give you a little introduction.
Thanks.
So Jenny is really big into the HR corporation, but that's just what she does. She spent over 25 years in the client experience industry at the corporate level, but she's also launched a new business that we'll get into. And she also really serves her community. Her father's an immigrant, a Mexican immigrant. Your grandparents were from the Jewish immigrants community, and it really leads you to do the work. And so we met at Poder. I think we've known each other for a while, but 3 years ago, Poder, you're the chair of the board there. They reached out to me, and I had never seen someone so fired up and so she exactly knew where she wanted me to target, how I could help them raise this money for this beautiful center. It's a community space, a workplace center for the immigrant community, the Mexican immigrant community on the southwest side of Chicago. But her tenacity and her fierceness of always being on top of it. And they were able to raise, how much money did you raise?
$6 million.
$6 million.
$6.1 million.
Awesome.
Immigrant Integration Center on the southwest side.
Wonderful.
Shameless plug for Poder.
Yeah, so Jenny does it all. And we're just so excited you could be here today.
I'm super excited to be here with both of you and really appreciative of the work that you're doing and helping women amplify and tell their stories because storytelling is medicine, and I believe that it significantly helps to elevate the rest of the women around us. So thank you.
Well, welcome, Jen. It's so good to know you. We're new friends, but having heard your story, a bit about your journey and what you're doing now, tell us what from your background, your upbringing, helps inform who you are today.
Ooh, well, Anna kind of gave a little bit of that, but being both the daughter of a Mexican immigrant and Jewish grandparents, and both really came from nothing. So my dad immigrated here in 1975, came from a very small ranch town in Mexico, central Mexico, called Ciudad Hidalgo, Michoacan. And he came here with no resources, no money, and worked so hard to just give us normal basic needs, right? And has allowed me to be the woman I am. And then I had the privilege of being raised by my Jewish grandmother, who was years beyond her years, an amazing leader at the forefront of women, amplifying women, leading Namat, which was a Jewish sisterhood organization. She marched for March of Dimes. She was one of the first people working for Special Olympics, delivering Meals for Wheels. So everything, to come from nothing and give all you had, was how I was raised, to just be tenacious, do the right thing, and just work hard to elevate other people around you and be a good human being. So
And I would say you came from everything.
Yeah.
Because the material things might not have been present, but you were blessed with these amazing people who really created the core of who you are. So thank you.
Such a great reframe, Connie. Thank you. Yeah, you're right.
And I think it's amazing when, we all kind of have similar backgrounds, where when I grew up, I didn't feel anything was missing.
Yeah.
I was so lucky to know that I was loved. I had a safe place to go, very kind parents, and that instilled faith in me and all my value system. And so I think even though we may not have had as much as others around us in terms of material things, when you're raised with that kind of love, you don't feel like anything is missing.
I felt the missing, I'll say, which is why I always say I'm a compassionate capitalist. Anna knows that. She talks to me. It's like, no, I felt the missing, the things, but having a village, you're right.
Yes.
Of people who loved and spoke good affirmative things to me about what I could be.
Yeah.
That was the important part. And that's the reframing, because I've had to do it for myself.
You're so right. You're so right. And it's funny because when I think about it now at 41, when I didn't have those things like 12 and 13, and I went to a school in Lincoln Park for junior high, and most of those kids had the latest Timberlands, the latest Jordans, the latest designer stuff. And my grandma did everything she could to give me as much as she could. She did a lot for me and gave me a lot. And in those moments now, in retrospect, I'm like, God, I had so much more than what I wanted in that moment. But it takes a lot of growth and self-awareness to really look backwards to realize what I needed in that moment. I had, absolutely. And especially given that my mom left at a very young age, and which is really untraditional. Usually it's the father that leaves and the daughter or the kids stay with the mom. She left when I was 9 years old, but her parents helped raise me, and they had raised me from day one. They lived 4 blocks down on the same street. So being raised by a very traditional Mexican man and old school Jewish grandparents was very interesting. But
I love the diversity of that.
Yes.
The wisdom, the complexity of it, but also the beauty
Yeah.
of how that worked and just how it made you who you are. There's some more great stories. We got to get to those.
Yes, and I know, so we talk a lot about on this podcast those pivotal moments in your life where they might have almost broke you or did break you, but it was that break open to joy that we talk about to our listeners. And I know just being, we've friends, but really gotten deeper friends this last year, your journey and your health journey and where you've been. So I would love for you to share some of those pivotal moments with our listeners.
Well, and Anna, you saw me in that hospital bed, like looking the most broke down I've ever looked in my life.
Which was okay.
Because
you need friends that are going to come there and love on you in that space with no judgment, but just to hold space for you. And I'm happy that Ellie and I could do that for you in that moment, because that's what you would want in return if you're going through something like that.
Well, interestingly, they brought affirmations, calendar, journal, and a warm blanket. And really their visit was a warm blanket. And I had all my close girlfriends come to be with me during that time. So I've suffered from endometriosis. I wasn't diagnosed until my mid to late 20s. I believe it's been since I was a teenager. But I've had 8 surgeries just for endometriosis. I've had a number of other health challenges that I suspect are probably adjacent to endo, but can't really tie it because of the lack.
For our listeners, in case they're not familiar, can you give a layperson's definition of what endometriosis is?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of research, so we don't really understand the root cause, but it is a women's disease that's really centered in your reproductive organs, and it's scar tissue that adheres to your uterus, your ovaries, etc. But some women, I've heard, have it grow onto their lungs, into their brain. I personally, one of my surgeries, I think the one in 2018, it had grown onto my appendix and caused appendicitis. So I had to have my appendix removed. So it's been quite a journey. And the stat was 1 in 10 women. It is now 1 in 8. But because of the lack of research and then the lack of care, especially in communities of women of color. There's so many women who live with this pain, and it's excruciating pain, right? There's some people that are like, oh, get over it, you have period cramps. I'm like, no, it's debilitating, can't get out of bed pain. And so January was really the worst experience I had ever had. So I had a couple cysts that had been really, really badly infected on my left ovary. And mind you, I've put my body through some additional strain and going through 8 rounds of IVF to try to be a mother as a single woman. So that's another segment. But I went in for this surgery because I had this pain, this fever. I had gone to an Eve of the Eve party, woke up in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve at 4 a.m, shivering, couldn't stop shaking, but my fever was 103.4. And so I yelled out for my dad. My dad now lives with me, which is a very interesting thing. And I got to the hospital right away. I had a procedure 2 weeks earlier to drain those cysts, and clearly my body had a reaction. So I had what they called, excuse me, a superinfection. And so initially we were trying to treat with a course of antibiotics. So I was in since New Year's Eve through January 5th. And we tried, because I'm like, I really don't want to have another surgery.
Yes.
So we tried. I was there for a week. My white blood cell count, pardon me, did come down a little bit. And then they sent me home, and I never got better. So I was home for a week, still spiking very low-grade fevers. Then we went back up to 102. So went back to the hospital on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And the Wednesday of that week, I had surgery. And unfortunately, what I had quote unquote prepared myself because I'm like, oh, I've done this before. I know it's going to be painful, but Dr. Malad is the chief of surgery at Northwestern, chief of surgery of gynecology at Northwestern. He's the best of the best. I know I'm resilient and will heal quickly. Wrong. It's kind of like, okay, trying to control the outcome of something that really is not outside of your control.
Which we all try to do.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Woke up that evening, which should have been probably maybe 3 to 4 hour surgery, ended up being almost 6 because the endometriosis had caused my colon to attach itself to my uterus. And so when they went to separate the two, unfortunately, the bowel was perforated and had to stop, tag in another surgeon, and do emergency repair surgery. And then I was there back in the hospital, or there in the hospital for another 3 weeks or so. Which you don't think about being in isolation like that, even with friends visiting. It's actually the mental that is the hardest part. The physical, I'm like, let's do it. Get me up out of bed. Let's walk. I'm ready to eat, which, by the way, I couldn't eat for 3 weeks either. So it was on IV fluids. But the mental was really hard. And all I could do is go inside and kind of hold my own hand through the darkness and say, hey, this is going to be a journey, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be all right.
It takes a lot of courage to talk about that.
Yeah.
And to tell the story. So thank you first and foremost for your authenticity and transparency. Going through something like that, and I've bore witness to situations like that as well, and you talked about the mental that you went through. What were some of the ways, Jen, that you were able to sustain yourself and hold on?
Gosh, so many things. One was girlfriends coming to visit me and be with me. My dad was there every single day.
He was the cutest.
He was there every day. And poor him, like he was trying to cook at home and getting ready to be like, okay, when are you going to be clear to eat so that you can eat something? Yes. And really, I kept telling myself, you've been through worse. You really have been through worse. And I had a very traumatic childhood. And I've worked very, very, very hard on trying to heal from that. And so I kept reminding myself, you've been through so much worse than this, and you're going to get through. What I came to realize was, hey, this was a life-threatening situation. And so that's when the breakdown happened, was like, God, I've spent all my life working so hard to have the best title, and to continue to elevate through my career, to buy the latest things, to spend money on designer things. And those things are nice too. I'm not going to hate on that, right?
Those are the things that Connie said she knew was missing in her childhood. And now as adults, we're making up for.
Exactly.
All of the things, buying a home, vacationing. And in that moment, I was like, none of it matters.
Hi, I'm Darius Hillman. Joining me on the next In the Arena, the chair of the City Club of Chicago, Jackie Robinson Ivy.
To whom much is given, much is required. And, I could not be the half-time good Christian that I try to be if I was not giving back.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
What were the things that came up for you, Jen, as you were saying, I'm very successful, but now when I had this life or death moment, here's what really, really matters to me.
It was family. It was family, and that's my chosen and my blood family. It was family and just peace. I just wanted peace because I felt like, one, I had been at war with myself almost all my life. Being at war with myself, meaning performing, because I was trying to fake that I wasn't broken inside. And now I was in a physical battle, and I'm like, God, I just want peace. And so those moments that I found the most peace and joy while I was in the hospital was time with friends and just laughing and making fun of my dad, joking around with the nurses. I mean, the first few days was really, really hard, but as I was there, I was kind of a roommate, right? I just had the same crew coming in and out. But it was... Having awareness sometimes is actually hard. Yeah. Having awareness is a great thing, but it's also really hard because
you have to sit in the uncomfortable.
Yes.
And we often talk about getting quiet and asking really tough questions of ourselves to know if we're in alignment with our purpose and our why, and maybe what God has called you to do. And so here you're in the hospital, and you didn't choose to get quiet this way, but here it was happening to you to kind of become that self-awareness and ask those questions like, are you happy? Are you finding joy in who you are and what you're doing? And I know with you are on this journey to become a mom as well. Yeah. And so I would love to hear a little bit too of like, as you came out of the hospital and this year, looking at what you've done in corporate and kind of making a pivot there too.
It's so funny because when I was sitting in the hospital, I said to my dad, so I was a partner in a business that for 8 years, and it was a great business. We served the small business community, 500 clients, really in the HR space, and I loved it. I fell in love even more with that small business community owner and entrepreneur. But unfortunately, we sold unfortunately, we sold the business last June. So by January, the group that acquired us was just terrible. And I was so stressed, and I knew I needed to leave, but I didn't want to leave my team. It was really hard for me. But sitting there after all that happened, I looked at my dad and I said, this is it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going back. I cannot go back. If I go back, I basically am laughing at myself and saying, you know what, your health doesn't matter. Go back and start the stress clock right over again. Exactly. So I told him I'm out. So I took my medical leave. I came back for a couple weeks, and then I gave notice. And I was going to take the whole summer off and figure it out. And then I had a couple people reach out and say, hey, we'd love to pay you to help us think through client experience, service optimization, team development. 1 became 2. Suddenly 2 became 3. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a consulting practice. I'm going to do my own thing. And now I get to do my own thing that really is focusing on the parts of the work that bring me the most joy, which is helping to amplify the small business community, helping the small business community leader feel less alone, right? Entrepreneurship is incredibly lonely. And now I get to do all that stuff. Because before, when I oversaw client experience and employee experience, I got to do those things. But also something went wrong. I was getting my teeth kicked in, 20 times a day. Hey, Jen, your firm did this wrong. So that's where I got to shift my focus. And it's been really hard to build, but it's brought me so much joy. And I named the practice I named the practice in honor of both of my grandmothers, Bess and Bartola. So it's called Bestola Consulting. Yes. And really, it's taken on a life of its own. And these are 2 women who never knew each other. My grandmother on my dad's side, Bartola, I never got to meet, but warrior woman and had 6 children. My dad was 2 months premature, and this is on this ranch in Mexico. No health care in the 50s, right? They didn't even have electricity when he was born. Wow. They had petroleum at the time. And she kept him alive with her body heat and a hot water bottle. And I learned when I was older, she had multiple miscarriages aside from the 6 kids. So I kind of suspect that maybe the endo actually comes from that side of the family, but without any health records, or I don't know. But she was a warrior, Mayan descent. I've done 23andMe. And then Bess, just being the warrior woman. She raised me at 68 years old to be, she was my mom. She was
What's
really
the best
my mom.
advice she gave you?
Oh, gosh. The best advice she gave me was to always be true to yourself. Yes. And it was funny because I found pictures of her in the 30s and 40s, in the 40s that she sent to my grandfather when he was over in World War II. And she wrote on the back, like, I really don't look pretty in this photo. Hopefully you don't hate it. And I'm like, wow, she was insecure. I'm shocked. Right. But then by the time I knew her, she was fully in her own and just this life and light force. And she just taught me to always give back, too, have courage, give back, and just be a powerful woman. So being able to give life to Bestola in that way from both of those gifts, 2 women from very different backgrounds, but so very similar, is really the tenacity comes from the women in my ancestry, for sure.
Yeah, it's said that difficult times don't make us who we are, they reveal who we are.
Yeah.
And so for you and both your grandmothers, God love them, they really have revealed for you what it looks like to be that woman who stands in her power.
Yes. And to know who you are.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is you started this journey, I know we were talking kind of before, like 7 years prior to this health. And had you not started that journey of self-discovery, and you talked a little bit about executive coaching. And so how did you seek that out at, I think you said 32, you were kind of looking to do that work. How did you seek that out? How did you know what you were looking for, and how did it help you?
I have not met my Mr. Wonderful, my king, not my prince, my king.
Because you are a queen.
Thank you.
A queen,
Thank you. But I knew deep in my heart, my whole life, I wanted to be a mom. And that also was, that at this point in my life is the most important thing to me. The work that I do is incredibly important, but it allows me to be a mom. So I was starting that journey in my early to mid 30s of freezing my eggs. So initially I froze my eggs. But before I did any of that, I'm like, look, if I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to have to do some real hard, heavy lifting and inner work because I have to be whole for this child because I don't want my child to ever, I can't prevent suffering, but I don't ever want to be a cause of my child's suffering the way, and transparent, my dad and I worked very hard on our relationship, but he also suffers from alcoholism, which is a disease, and he's a wonderful human. But that, along with my mom leaving me, which causes abandonment wounds, et cetera, being abused as a young child by her boyfriend, caused a lot of gaping dark wounds in me, and I knew it. And I said, if I'm going to be a mother, then there's a lot of inner work that I need to do first. And so I started on my therapy journey. I see my therapist once a week, every week, Tuesday mornings. Monica, I love because she holds me accountable. She's a no BS type of person. She knows me well enough to be like, like, no, girl.
Everyone needs that in their lives.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's incredibly hard. I don't think, and it's still hard, even 7 years in, because you think, oh, yeah, I've healed all these parts of myself. And then something comes out of left field, triggers you, and you're like, oh, no, I got to go back in and do some more work there. But then I also had a great executive coach during my time at Empower, which he was more of a spiritual executive coach. So really talking about things like how you perceive things in the physical, how you perceive things in intellectual space, but really going back to your spirit and your core on how you want to respond to things. And I've tried other healing modalities too. I mean, I do a lot of acupuncture, meditation, yoga. I've tried plant medicine as well a couple times, which has helped me process some of my trauma. Unfortunately, the IVF has not been successful to date, but that's going to send me on embarking a new journey, which is adoption, which will be a whole nother set of work that I'll have to do. Because Anna, you and I were talking about it's grieving the loss of being able to carry your own child physically. And
the dream of that.
The dream.
That you think of, what your child might be like or not, seeing yourself in that child. And we talked about there's a lot of women, we don't talk about that enough, that there's a whole grieving. I don't think it ever goes away. It's just how you have the manage it and manage the pain and not let it over-consume you.
Yeah, it's coping skills.
Yes,
it's absolutely.
exactly.
And I think we're
skills.
hearing more about that now.
Yeah.
And, we're a part of that. Is if we can talk about our pain, not be so wedded to it that defines totally who we are. It certainly informs how we move in the world, but to make it okay to say you're grieving that.
Yeah.
And I'm child-free by choice, but I certainly have deep empathy for people who want that. It's some of my babies call me Auntie Mama, but it's right to want that and not have it. And we want people to understand what that means and what that looks like and how do we create pathways to do that. I have a question for you, Jen.
Yeah.
Anna and I also have a commitment for this discussion to talk about leadership as well. And people who are on our teams experience trauma. What are some of the ways you as a leader can identify that in individuals on your team? And how do you provide psychological safety? Perhaps
Yes.
not asking you to be a psychologist, but I think all of us as leaders, I always say, I cannot lead a team that I don't care about,
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
that I don't have compassion and empathy. What are some of the ways that you identify, and then how do you engage and treat those team members?
It's really funny that you say that because there's several young women who were on my team that would always ask me for a couple minutes, and then at the end they'd be like, damn it, I shouldn't have asked you for any time because now I'm crying again. You always make me cry. One is starting with vulnerability and truth.
Yes.
You cannot create a safe space for someone if you are not vulnerable and real with them first. And so as a leader, I believe you earn the right to lead. Anna hears me say this all the time. And
That's because you helped coach me, so thank you.
You're welcome.
agree.
Leaders set the standard. And so if I want to create a safe space and vulnerability for people to talk about whatever's heavy on their heart, I have to show them that it's okay to do that. Another friend of mine, Elena, always says, and other people say it as well, but you can't be what you can't see. And so that at that moment also when I left Empower, I knew my team was suffering too. So I'm like, if I continue to stay, I'm telling my team it's okay to stay and hurt yourself in this hurtful situation. And so most of the people that I've led have been women. I've had the joy and the privilege of doing that. But I can tell. I have an inner knowing when someone's in pain, probably because I've grown up with pain. And so I usually just ask, like, how you doing today? Are you okay? And sometimes people will start crying off the bat because they're like, ooh, she saw me and I needed it. Other times, if I see people being a different version than their best self, I'm going to ask, what's going on? Let's talk. But a lot of it has been through sharing my own story, because I think when you get to a certain place in leadership, especially with access through social media, I think young women are like, oh, yeah, they make it look so easy. And I'm like, oh, no, homegirl. No. Like, we have gone through a lot.
What you see me right now is not the scars that I carry from getting here.
Yes.
We talked about that last night.
Right. And we are not what has happened to us.
Exactly.
Yes.
We can talk about it, and you've done the hard work. People always say doing the work, but you have. And the fact that you're telling that story, I know, is going to benefit our listeners as well. And I've done the same thing, achieved really, really high levels in corporate America, and would talk about my story, and folks would say, I can't believe you said that. Now people will know that you lived in public housing at one point. And I'm like, yeah, and I don't have 3 eyes and 4 ears either.
Right.
And, it's that whole notion of I'm really comfortable with who I am and the experiences that I've had. And if my story helps you know that you are seen and heard, I'm okay with that.
Amen. And also, Connie, to the women that are living in public housing too, especially young women, when they can see you and say,
you can be it.
Oh gosh, I can be okay too.
That's it.
100%.
That's why it's so powerful. On my vision board that I created in the hospital in January, part of it is what I put on there said, I'm ready to tell my story, or I'm ready to share my story. And again, it's because I care deeply about the people that I lead, indirectly or directly. And I know people are watching. I know young women are watching. And I said that when I was at Empower. I would say to my colleagues also on the leadership team, I said, these young women are watching.
For sure.
Not just professionally, but personally.
Absolutely.
And so they're not going to listen to the words. They're going to watch the actions. And so it's the commitment to the practice of the work that is so critically important, because people see right through you.
Yes.
If you're like, oh, yeah, posting daily affirmations, et cetera, or talking the talk, people know when you are not walking that walk.
Well, we could talk all day, but I know I want in 30 seconds define joy for us.
Joy for me is such a big word, right? Joy feels like a big word to me, especially around the Christmas season, et cetera. Joy for me is just peace. It's those little moments. It's hanging out with your girlfriends in sweats and pigging out on stuff. It's taking a walk with a girlfriend, or walking my dog, or laying on the couch, chatting with my dad. The benefit of him living with me is I'm learning more stories of his youth that I never even knew. Those nuggets, that's what brings me the most joy. It makes me feel whole again. And it brings me the most peace. So joy for me is peace.
I love it. Well, we're going to kick it off and end here with Say Less with Connie. What do you got for us today?
Thank you, Jen, for showing and telling us who you are and living it. And what it brought to mind for me were 3 things, is that notion of peace. But the first one is, how do we hold space for one another? How do we give each other permission to be who we are truly and in the moment? The soul is waiting for us to acknowledge who we are. The second is that anticipation and awareness, to know that we are present in this moment, to be aware of that, and to just anticipate, not with anxiety, but just to anticipate and be aware of who we are and where we are. And thirdly is to think about joy, defining it for ourselves, and knowing that we were created for a purpose. And when we find that purpose and tie it to joy, that's power. So I wish you joy, and I wish you peace.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jen. You are so brave.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you for being with us. And we will see you on our next episode of Joy in the Breakthrough.